Hi, this is the author of this mod for Doki Doki Literature Club. Doki Doki Literature Club belongs to, and all its associated intellectual property belongs to Team Salvato. You should play Doki Doki Literature Club, which is freely available at ddlc.moe, M-O-E, before playing this mod. Ideally, as I've written it, you would also play Doki Doki Literature Club Plus's side stories, which this mod is sort of written in the style of and takes place after. So this is my DVD style commentary on what I was thinking when I wrote this mod and sort of how the writing process went and why I made the decisions I did. This is my first sort of writing project that I've that's of any substance that I've written to completion, and I found the process really enjoyable. I was actually inspired by Doki Doki Literature Club, so it seemed appropriate to make a mod using these characters as my first sort of writing project. And all I really did was devote a little bit of time every day, not even very much, about half an hour to an hour every day to writing a little bit. And I just wrote sort of whatever came to mind. At the end of it, about 60% of what I had written made up, 50% of a story maybe, and then I, from there, kind of had a clear direction, and then I just sort of wrote the rest of the scenes. So, for example, this scene, I wrote last almost. I actually wrote this sort of dialogue here of Yuri saying, yeah, a boy in my class asked me out. And then say, are you jumping in? I wrote that first, nearly. When I wrote it, I didn't realize I would get to play with the font size. Once I realized that I could do that with Ren'Py, I was quite excited. So, of course, I used that for the gag of Yuri getting quieter and quieter and Sayori, pouncing loudly. Just another thing to say is, after I wrote a bunch of dialogue for it, then I had to go in and put it in the engine, and I had to make a lot of decisions on the character acting, what postures and expressions everyone would make. And I had a really fun time with that. That definitely added a lot more work, but I think I really like visual media. I don't really like writing like literature style things because I really like having a lot of focus on the characters, and I like letting them have like facial expressions and acting performances basically as a way of expressing what's going on with them, which is part of why I like playing video games and watching movies so much. So one thing throughout this scene with Yuri here is that that I had a pretty clear idea about is that I wanted, you'll notice throughout the scene, the characters move in and out of frame to the left and to the right. I wanted to keep sort of a clear sense of where all the characters were standing and give an implication that the camera was moving around, that it was panning back and forth. So there Yuri exited to the right and Monica entered to the left. And that's supposed to just feel like the camera is moving. And so since characters are entering and exiting the scene, first of all, it just felt it was too busy to have 4 characters on the scene at once. They just take up too much space. It felt very crowded. So that solved a practical problem. But the other practical problem that I wanted to solve was that I wanted it to feel like a surprise when Yuri isn't there anymore. So if I only did this once, it would kind of feel like Yuri left the scene. But since characters are going in and out of the scene all the time, even though Yuri isn't in frame here, if I've done my job right, the idea is that you feel like Yuri is sitting just off screen, which is how the characters are feeling too. And so it's not until when we hear the door close in a moment that we know Yuri has actually left, which is supposed to be a surprise. So here, Natsuki is being quite judgmental, but she's right, so she feels very vindicated. I think it's nice to have friends like this who are not afraid of passing judgment, because of course she's doing it in a compassionate way, right? She's trying to help Yuri make a decision, and from everyone's perspective here, Yuri's very shy, and what they've failed to do in the scene is make enough space for her to enter the conversation. They've gotten so rambunctious and so wrapped up in the drama of the romance that they kind of are they've sort of formed this council of Yuri's love life to try to help her make a decision. But as we see in the next scene, the real problem is not that Yuri doesn't know how to make a decision. The problem is more fundamental. She doesn't know how to feel. So Monica here is the one to come out and invite Yuri back into the club room. Here, there's an interesting parallel that I didn't deliberately write, but I think reveals what I think about the psychology of these characters. Monica apologizes on behalf of the club, and Yuri says it's okay. Really, it is. And to me, I imagine that both Yuri and Natsuki sort of harbor a lot of shame, which is why Natsuki is the one who pulls Yuri out of her sort of self-sabotage habit that we'll see in a later chapter. So Natsuki later will apologize, and she'll say, I'm sorry, really I am. And to me, just what both these characters need that neither Sayori nor Monica need is they have to sort of double check with their feelings. They'll say what they think is right first, or they'll say what sort of matches their persona. Yuri puts on sort of a lot of shyness, like she kind of clamps herself up. And that's how she deals with the sort of shame that she harbors a lot of the time. Natsuki, meanwhile, puts on sort of a face of bravado, and that's how she handles her shame and her relation to her own feelings. But both of them, since they don't have direct access to their feelings, or they do, but it's a little delayed, they have a hard time sort of noticing their own feelings directly, unlike Sayori and Monica, especially Sayori. They both need to take a beat to sort of check in with their feelings after they've committed to saying something. So Yuri accepts the apology, then sort of checks in with her feelings, and then verifies that in fact she has accepted the apology. And later we'll see Natsuki apologize, check in with her own feelings, and then verify that she's being sincere in her apology. So here Yuri is having a problem I often have, which is a difficult time. Like I have a difficult time, as I was saying, checking in with my own feelings, sort of understanding what my feelings actually are, and I have a much easier time analyzing things. So Yuri is stuck in a loop of analysis, and Sayori is here as the resident feelings expert to help Yuri figure out a way to get in touch with her feelings. And so the language choice is revealing here, in that Yuri says, that's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out my feelings. And Sayori is there to point out that you don't really figure out feelings exactly. You can figure out where your feelings come from, but you have to just sort of notice your feelings directly. And in order to do that, you can't think. You have to sort of make space for your feelings to kind of appear. So she gives some practical advice on what to do to make space for your feelings to make themselves known. And Natsuki then follows up with practical advice on what to do about Takashi. And that is relieving for Yuri, because Yuri could just keep herself in this analysis paralysis for the rest of her life, basically. Or at least until it festers into a mental illness, to paraphrase Futurama. So Natsuki gives sort of a default option, which is well-reasoned, and that I agree with, which is that if she's really on the fence, if she genuinely doesn't know what to do, not just if she feels like doesn't want to go on the date but feels guilty about it, if she legitimately doesn't know what to do, then probably the thing to do is just to say yes to the date. She can determine if she's having a fun time, or if she will have a fun time dating Takashi much better after she's actually gone on a date. So this scene to me is kind of this is a scene I'm quite happy with, I would say. First of all, I like that it starts with, I feel like a lot of this fell into my lap. I wasn't deliberate about this, but it all worked out nicely, that I allowed a lot of things to transpire kind of at once, right? Here, Monica and Sayori tell Natsuki, and consequently the audience, what happened, so we don't have to waste a whole scene on what would be sort of a short amount of dialogue, which, the point is just that Yuri stopped by, she dropped off the supplies, she obviously apologized profusely because she got swept up and accepted the date. And Sayori and Monica were so excited for her that they covered for her, even though in the first scene, Monica required that all the club members show up for this decoration thing. And we know from playing Doki Doki Literature Club that Yuri is quite good at exactly this kind of thing. She's got a good eye for these kinds of like physical decorations, and she's got quite a talent for it. So here Sayori, of course, loves imagining that her friends are loves imagining her friends happy. So she's kind of indulging in this fantasy of Yuri having a really like spectacularly, fantastically romantic date, which Natsuki is perhaps surprisingly annoyed by. And so this psychologically what's going on here is that Natsuki, as she's about to explain, she kind of harbors a lot of shame. Basically, to get right to the point of it, she harbors a lot of shame because she's essentially jealous of Yuri. She says she's not. When she says she's not jealous, she's really kind of asserting that she's not jealous. But she's not jealous of Yuri dating Takashi specifically. She's jealous of Yuri having the date that Natsuki imagines that she's having, which is not the date that she's really having, as we'll learn later. But so Natsuki here has kind of not the opposite necessarily, but a coping mechanism with feelings that she feels a lot of shame from, that sort of contrasts Yuri's. So she here is trying to bottle up her emotions like Yuri does. But she does a lot of lashing out. Yuri does a lot of lashing in, which I think is a real term. So Sayori specifically calls her out on lashing out. Now, I really liked the idea of, none of these girls are experienced in love at all, really, or in dating, I should say. So Natsuki gets to draw some wisdom from the manga that she reads, and I just liked I liked giving her an opportunity to do that, because in DDLC and in DDLC Plus, we don't hear a lot about the manga. It's a nice device for the player to get closer to Natsuki, but I like the idea that I wanted to know what was kind of actually going on in the manga and why Natsuki liked it so much. So I just liked giving Natsuki the opportunity here to talk about why she likes the manga so much, and that it has really kind of a profound impact on her and has shaped her sense of self, because it's given her an opportunity to think about what it is that she wants in a romance. But of course she's a little ashamed about it, because in part because and this casts Monika in a bad light, but Monika's a little dismissive. She's a little judgmental about the manga, so that certainly exacerbates Natsuki's shame about feeling like they're kind of trashy, or they're kind of shallow. They're not real literature, so to speak. But in a lot of this, I was putting myself into this whole narrative. So Natsuki's view on love was modified a lot by her reading this manga. And in the same sense, Natsuki also picked up baking because she liked what she read in the manga, and I of course have picked up writing because of what I liked in Doki Doki Literature Club, and Doki Doki Literature Club, helped me have a different view. It sort of shaped my view on myself and sort of my relationship to, to several different things. So I liked giving Natsuki a chance to sort of gush about not gush, but really give some cogent analysis on why she likes this manga so much. And I think stories, really do have a big impact on us. It's fun to be on the other side of the story writing and see that also has a big impact, but in a different way from when you're consuming a story. So that line there by Sayori, where she says maybe boys are just too dumb to realize how much fun they could be having dating you. That was a line that kind of gave me a lot of trouble. I had a surprising. It was surprising to me which characters I had a hard time getting their voices right. To me, a really major part of writing. I know this a lot from reading fan fiction, for example. But a common mistake with fan fiction, I think, is that, or maybe not a mistake, but a common difficulty people have when writing fan fiction is getting the character voices right. But I think that's really paramount. I think if your characters don't sound like themselves, or don't sound like they do in the main material, then it sounds fake, which is why even though I don't write laughs normally like AHA, but that's how they say it in the main game. So I always had the girls laugh as aha instead of haha, which is typically how I write it. But anyway, Sayori's line there about maybe boys are just too dumb to recognize how much fun they could be having dating you, and once they grow up and get smarter, they'll have a better time, or they'll have an easier time recognizing that they could be having fun dating you, and then they'll ask you out. That was a line that gave me some trouble because when I first wrote it, I wrote it a lot like I just said it, which is one large complex sentence. But that just doesn't sound right for Sayori. When she's speaking extemporaneously, she wouldn't compose complex sentences. She would compose sort of shorter, more direct sentences. And surprisingly, even though I tend to use pretty large vocab and often use complex sentences, I was surprised to find that when I was writing, I actually had a hard time getting Yuri's voice right. At least with the first pass. Yuri's lines often needed a second pass to make sure that she was using sufficiently complex sentences and that she was using sophisticated vocabulary. Funnily enough, really Natsuki and Monica were the ones who typically I would write their lines and they just kind of came out right. They just kind of came out sounding like Natsuki or came out sounding like Monica. Okay, so this scene is about to get really interesting. Here Yuri's, of course, recounting her date. I was tempted to do a flashback here, but I didn't have the assets for it. Overall, I think I'm glad I didn't. I don't think that would have been necessary, but it sure would have been a lot more work. Okay, already. So Yuri has now, she's involved herself in this this coping mechanism for the shame that she's feeling, right? So she wanted Takashi to have a good time, and she wanted to have a good time, and she's ashamed that she didn't. So she feels like she let Takashi down. And so now she is prosecuting herself, basically. She's cast herself in the role of prosecutor, and she's making the positive argument that she is basically a bad person and that she's undateable and that she doesn't know how to have any fun. And she has insidiously roped her friends in as defendants, which they don't know. So Sayori and Monica are really not privy to this. They're trying to give her direct advice on how to feel better, but she doesn't want to feel better. She wants to feel worse. Natsuki, however, picks up on this vibe because it has to do a lot with this sort of like harboring shame. So I don't think Natsuki could describe in words what it is that just happened, but she felt that Yuri was using some kind of trick and that that she was being unfair, which is why she says cut it out. I don't think Natsuki or even Yuri really know exactly what it is in Natsuki's command for Yuri to cut it out, but they both feel what it is. Sayori and Monica are very surprised by it. Yuri is caught off guard, but continues the conversation. She gets defensive, whereas, you know, if Natsuki had yelled that at Sayori or Monica, they would have said, like, Natsuki, what are you talking about? Cut what out? What do you mean? But Yuri also knows that she's up to something. She also knows that she's like sort of entrapped her friends in this sort of insidious framing that kind of no matter what they say, she gets to use it as further evidence that she's a bad person. So I relate to Yuri a lot on this. I've definitely done this a lot in the past. And it's really unfair to your friends. Because it's hard for them to notice that that's what's going on. It's maybe impossible for them to notice what's going on. Natsuki, however, picks up on it, and she cuts to the heart of it. She reframes it back as a question about what Yuri is actually feeling, and she breaks the question down quite a bit. Or, you know, did you feel on the date? Did you feel the way that you do when you're around us? Did you feel did you feel safe? Did you feel like ashamed? How did you feel? So that makes it much easier for Yuri to focus on how she's feeling. And Natsuki correctly frames it as like, when you are on a date with someone who you want to be with, you won't feel the way that you did. And that's where your assessment can stop, right? You don't need to be mad at yourself for making mistakes. It's not helpful. So that works really well, although she does have to battle Yuri on it. But Natsuki, of course, is someone who's ready to do that. I think both Sayori and Monica would have caved a little bit faster in the interest of being sort of polite to Yuri. But Natsuki doesn't care about being polite. She only cares about being kind, and she can see that Yuri is basically being mean to Yuri, and so she treats Yuri as she would treat anyone else who was being mean to Yuri, which is basically as an enemy or a hostile witness. So I like this scene a lot between Yuri and Takashi. I'm not sure exactly why. While I was doing it, I wasn't sure why I decided to black out, like, sort of silhouette Takashi and Hikaru, I think is what I named the other male character. But I think what it came down to, it felt like the right choice, and I stand by it. But I think what it came down to is that I didn't want to give the audience very many opportunities to make direct judgments about the male relationships. I didn't want to give you the opportunity to sort of fall into Natsuki or Sayori's or Monika's habit in chapter 1 of like quickly making assumptions about the person themselves. But I did want you to think a lot about the relationship between the characters. So we can see here that Yuri and Takashi have, they're both kind people. Takashi cares about how Yuri was feeling, and Yuri cares about how Takashi was feeling. But they are not really able to hold a conversation well. Like they never really lock into the same wavelength. When Takashi asks her if she was thinking the same thing, he's talking about the date, but Yuri thinks he's talking about the statement that he just made, which is that he's kind of closed off and hard to communicate with. And then when Yuri responds, yes, I am closed off and hard to communicate with, Takashi fails to sort of pivot back to that, and instead clumsily points out that he actually meant about the pastries. So I found this scene pretty funny. I'm not talking about it now like it's funny, but I hoped it would be funny. I hope people would read it and laugh when they see sort of how clumsy the two are in trying to have a successful conversation. So then with Natsuki and Hikaru, which I think I'm saying that name right, I wanted to show basically that they have a lot more chemistry. So now Natsuki is in sort of an unusual circumstance where she is helping out the library. She's not in class. She's not, she's in an unusual circumstance. And so she gets to be, somehow that she feels like that gives her permission to be a little more honest. So here, Hikaru picks up on sort of Natsuki's playful style of kind of being playful style of bravado, and so he facilitates this fiction that they're giving each other their contact information, but under the guise of like the practicality of getting these mangas back, when obviously they're both just sort of interested in spending more time together. So I just wanted Yuri and Takashi's conversation to contrast pretty heavily with Natsuki's and Hikaru's, and we can see immediately Natsuki's back to justifying well, I had to get his number so we could coordinate when he returns volume 1, and yeah, Sayori, it's not a big deal, I needed it for practical reasons. But when Monika presses her on it, she says, yeah, I actually am excited, and I think that's because she was honest with her friends about how she really feels about her about romance, and now that they know about it, she can be a little more honest with them, and that helps her be a little more honest with herself. So at the end, they presumably start planning their next club event. I don't know what that event will be, but just in Doki Doki Literature Club, the whole plot revolved around them picking or preparing for the festival, and this plot revolved around them preparing for the library outreach event. So I figure, whatever comes next will probably also be based around another event, because it seems like the writers for the girls in this canon like to frame things around club events. So probably that's what's going to happen next with them. I have no plans to continue this story exactly, but I do plan to keep writing, and I don't have any specific plans of what I'm going to write. So it's definitely possible that I'll keep writing about, that I'll make more Doki Doki Literature Club mods. And I would like to do that, but I am very much in the, just writing stuff and sort of seeing what happens phase. So I don't know that it'll be anything to do with Doki Doki Literature Club, but I would be happy to revisit these characters. I had a really good time writing them. Of course, I had a really good time in playing Doki Doki Literature Club and getting to know the characters a little bit, which was what inspired me to write a little bit of fiction about them. I think one thing I'd really like to do is write a fan fiction of The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, which is one of my favorite romance animes ever. But I was kind of dissatisfied with where the anime ended. So I might do something with that. Similarly, I quite like focusing on romance. I think that's a fun topic. and that's one I find really interesting. And I tend to really like anime that has sort of psychological romance elements. So The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya is my absolute favorite anime of all time. I feel pretty comfortable saying that. And I just recently finished watching and then reading Kaguya-sama Love is War, which I really enjoyed. That's probably now my number 2 anime. So I'll probably keep writing about romance, but I'm not sure exactly in what medium. But I really liked doing the visual novel thing because it was, like I said, I liked having the characters get to perform, but it's not easy to do that in, if you have to make animations or hire actors or whatever else. So I might keep doing things in a visual novel kind of way. And maybe I'll actually add some player choice next time, but who knows. Anyway, thanks for checking out this commentary. I had a great time writing this, and I had a great time recording this. I hope you found the conversation interesting. And let me know if you think I did a good job capturing the characters' personalities. If the writing felt authentic, and if the story felt engaging, because I'll admit, I'm pretty happy with where it ended up. I think it's a pretty cute, compelling story, but it's one of my first that I've written. So I'd love to know what other people think about it. Okay, thanks again.